About halfway through my career, I started working at the most prestigious private college in the state. I was in the IT department and responsible for maintaining several servers and all the equipment in the lecture halls. Every year in the summer, we were allocated a budget, and my portion of the expenses went mainly toward upgrading audio or video systems in the lecture halls. Most of the work happened during the summer, and usually there were no problems. But a few years ago, the college administration planted a bomb of delayed action. They decided to invest about $100,000 in new equipment for several lecture halls, but did not allocate a single cent in the future budget for its repair or replacement when it would break down. I had worked there for 5 years, and the equipment was just starting to break down. Increasing the budget was impossible, despite the fact that the academic process increasingly depended on the technology in these lecture halls. I had to figure out myself how to replace the equipment in these lecture halls on a limited budget, and simultaneously update the equipment in others where modernization was planned. Okay, I was ready for difficulties. I had to optimize purchases, switch to more budget brands, and do extra work to save money somewhere. Due to delays with deliveries, most of the equipment was delivered late, and I had about a month to replace the old equipment, lay wiring, and set up everything in about 15 lecture halls, as well as update and test the already installed equipment. And all this needed to be done before the start of the semester. Realizing the volume of the upcoming work, I began to work like a damn man. I came to work every day without days off for 28 days in a row, worked 8 to 10 hours to ensure that by the start of the semester, everything worked for the professors. I was on a salary, so I was not required to clock hours, which gave me the freedom to work as much as needed. I was exhausted to death, and at the end of these 28 days, I fell ill. My boss had recently been appointed to this position. Let's call him Gus. Before the start of the semester, during equipment testing, I noticed that the audio driver in one of the top models of computers that stood in the lecture halls was damaged. After figuring it out, I realized that the computer manufacturer had posted broken drivers on their server from where we downloaded them. I asked my boss who was responsible for the image deployment server to rebuild the image with the corrected driver that I gave him. He said he would do it the next day. I went to check if everything was ready. No, it wasn't ready. I say that I really need it because there's less and less time before the start of the semester. He promised to take care of it the next day. Again, nothing. Another day later, still nothing. In the end, he figured it out and I continued my work. Apparently, he didn't like that I was pressuring him and probably realizing his own incompetence, and he really was incompetent. He decided to act like a boss and called me to his office with the question of why I was working so much. I explained to him about the mess with the budget a few years ago, delays with deliveries, cheap equipment, additional work, and how he himself delayed my work. I told him, listen, I came day after day for that rebuilt image. Each time pronouncing the word day, I tapped my finger on the edge of the table to emphasize how much these delays slowed down my work. He wanted to find some kind of mistake in me to issue a reprimand based on it, but I didn't give him the slightest reason. In the end, he ran out of ideas, and I just walked out of the office. Gus, however, was a sycophant of the highest order. He ran after our IT director like a puppy. Moreover, they played together in the same music band, so I was already at a disadvantage. The semester began, and not a single problem arose in the lecture halls. I was proud that I had succeeded despite the difficulties. On the second day of the semester, the IT director calls me to his office. Gus is already sitting there, and they both want to talk to me. I immediately didn't like where this was going. The IT director starts asking why I was working so much. As I explained to Gus, I explained to him all the reasons why there was especially a lot of work this summer. My arguments instantly destroyed any baseless claims they might have had. Then Gus began to spout nonsense about how he was supposedly innocently interested in my work, but I became aggressive, saying that that very gesture of tapping my finger on his desk was violent and illustrated his inability to complete the task on time. I showed exactly the same gesture on the IT director's desk to demonstrate how absurd it was. The IT director just wanted to show his power, and they weren't going to stop until they figured out what to punish me for. No matter what I said, it didn't change their attitude toward me. I didn't forget to emphasize how much time it took Gus to complete a small task that my work depended on when I would have handled it in an hour. He was incompetent. Then the IT director hinted that I should show more respect to Gus because he's my boss. To hell with it all, I thought to myself, and said to the director, "It's the same as if Justin Bieber tried to teach you music theory. It would only annoy you." This sudden, sharp, and, in my opinion, damn funny metaphor was so spot on that both Gus and the director burst out laughing, although Gus himself was the object of this joke. When they stopped laughing, the director became serious again. He said that I could have managed my work time better despite the special circumstances of the summer work. At the same time, he began to speak slowly and softly. He somehow admitted that he uses this technique in arguments to make the other person look out of control. Such a condescending manner of speech, as if talking to a child, and now he's using it on me. He says he wants me to take a course on time management, and also that I take a couple of days off and think about it, but at the same time, he needs my pass and all the keys. And here begins my malicious compliance. At this stage, this person gave me enough reasons to understand that this is not the job I want to stay at. It's absurd. I work 28 days without days off, without extra pay, on an exhausting schedule. And for this, they're going to issue me a disciplinary action. Enough. Without saying anything, I handed him my badge, took off all the keys from the keyring, and placed them on his desk. I thought I say, in the same soft and condescending tone, that he spoke to me. "You can keep the keys and the badge," I added with the most sarcastic smile on my face. I went to my office. The IT director followed me, and I noticed that his eyes were filled with tears. He expected that I would comply and accept punishment for a well-done job. He kept repeating, "I just want you to think more and more desperately each time." And I answered, "I've already thought." He disappeared into his office along with his petty lackey Gus to discuss how they would now plug the holes. I quickly wrote a letter to all colleagues informing them that I was leaving and that it was a pleasure to work with them. I had to hurry because I knew that access to all accounts would be cut off very quickly. I gathered my personal belongings and left. Gus and the IT director offered to help, tried to play the situation back, make some gesture of goodwill, but it was too late. I had worked there for 5 years, but I was ready to leave the very second they started treating me so badly. Later I learned that a week before my departure, a female programmer quit because he also treated her terribly. I didn't know then why she left so suddenly, but the office manager told me that she, like me, left without any plan, simply unable to endure his arrogant behavior. About a year later, the office manager reported that the IT director also left. Rumors were that he spent most of his time working for another company right from the college's office, meaning he was getting paid for 2 jobs while doing only one. The administration caught him and issued a warning. Instead of admitting his mistake, he decided to just leave. The only thing I regret is that I didn't leave there earlier. Many in the comments wrote that I brought this situation upon myself, that I chose to work for free, or that I shouldn't have worked so hard. But that was my decision. It was never a problem for me. The problem is that the director ignored all the difficulties I faced and decided that it was my personal incompetence. I never once complained to either the director or the boss until they tried to slap me with a disciplinary action. Only then did I have to lay everything out clearly. When I started this job, several lecture halls and event spaces didn't work at all. Everything was in decline. Problems were in all the halls. I spent 1.5 years to restore and fix everything. When I implemented permanent solutions, we went from 4 to 5 complaints a day to a couple of complaints every 2 weeks. In the end, I automated everything to such an extent that my work became very easy. Then I started helping Gus at the help desk. He was its manager. Together with him and another employee, we actively handled tickets. Nobody asked me to do this. I volunteered myself because everything was under control and automated. I helped Gus cope with tasks that he himself couldn't handle, and he was grateful. It wasn't part of my duties, I just helped. But Gus was lazy smoked all day and dumped tasks on students who knew little but still more than he did. I had no complaints about him until he became my boss. Years of work showed me that fixing technical issues in the summer when the campus is empty takes much less time. You don't have to adjust to the class schedule and other restrictions. Yes, it was stressful, but taking complaints and getting additional pressure from the director if something didn't work in the lecture halls would have been even more stressful. When the semester started, everything became calm for me. If I had stayed, I would have taken a couple of days off and calmly gotten through the semester as it had been in previous years. All this extra work in the summer would have been balanced by plenty of relaxed days without overtime in the following months. And now let's move on to the next story. An evil manager constantly looked for a reason to fire me, and in the end she succeeded, but without me, the whole company fell apart. This happened many years ago. I started working at a consulting firm under a large corporation. This firm was created to build relationships with the local business community, of which the corporation was a part. I worked in the IT department. We had a team of 5 people. We set up computers for local businesses, launched accounting and billing systems for them trained employees, and provided technical support. It was a useful initiative for local businesses with low costs, and the firm operated very successfully. This went on for about 8 years until the main person in the firm left to work at the corporation itself, and a new director came in his place. The new one wasn't exactly problematic, but let's say a typical paper-pushing boss. He was unmatched in bureaucracy, but he left all personnel matters to the department heads. But he didn't get along with our IT manager, and in the end, she left after several months of harsh conflicts over various rules. I was the most experienced employee and had every chance to take her position. But according to office rumors, the director had already chosen her replacement himself in advance. It was strange because after the merger with the corporation, all hiring was supposed to go through the HR department. But he wanted the replacement to be instant, so he was grooming a new candidate in advance. And as soon as the IT manager left in a rage right during a meeting, he immediately put his person in her place. Remember, I said he was bad with personnel. Well, he was even worse with hiring and interviews. The new IT manager turned out to be catastrophically incompetent. Her resume was made up from start to finish. No management experience. And, as we later found out, zero knowledge in IT. How zero? She didn't know the difference between a Mac and a PC. She purchased a license for Office software for Macs for the entire office, while we worked on MS-OS on PCs. Although Windows 95 had come out a few years earlier, we had a contract with IBM, and the entire system was on DOS programs. In her resume, she supposedly had serious programming experience, but she didn't even know what a subroutine was. And it only got worse. Over the next couple of years, she deliberately pushed out all experienced employees. She demanded overly detailed time reports from the entire IT department, who called when we provided support, how much time we spent with clients or at the corporation. At the same time, this wasn't used for anything. There wasn't even internal tracking of requests. We accounted for even the time spent tracking time, and her increasingly absurd demands started taking up to an hour of the workday. Then the director himself shut it down. She also regularly took credit for department projects without mentioning the people who actually did them. One by one, my colleagues quit. She even set up one of them for a mistake she herself was responsible for, and this woman got permission to fire him. She replaced all the fired employees with people she knew from previous jobs, completely ignoring their experience and skills. For example, a programmer named Cole took the place of one of our training and support specialists. He was a great guy, but suffered in that role where she shoved him. She hired another woman instead of another employee, but all that woman had done before was write a training manual, even though all our training materials were provided under contract. I still don't understand what she did besides sometimes acting as a personal secretary, which was especially absurd since we already had secretaries. At the same time, she was paid 3 times more than the rest. As for me, my wife and I had just had our first child, and I no longer had time for pride. I just needed to bring a salary home. I started carefully covering myself from all sides because the IT manager was taking credit for everything I did. I thoroughly documented my work, and often her attempts to claim my achievements failed because it was too obvious she had no clue. Then she switched to trying to fire me. Anyone who's ever done technical support knows there will always be users you simply can't satisfy, purely a matter of personal incompatibility. Before, in such cases, we just passed the ticket to another IT employee, and it worked. My boss started blowing these cases up to the level of misconduct worthy of firing. In person, she swore she'd have my back like the previous IT manager did. She loved her team and was ready to go through fire and water for us. But behind my back, she tried to gather dirt to get rid of me. The first time I realized this was at a meeting where the director, one of our business consultants, the boss, herself, and I were present. The business consultant warned me in advance, so I came to the meeting with all the records of the errors they accused me of. She started her speech, but the consultant and I tore her apart, showed the director that she just made it all up. She was humiliated, and I came out unscathed. The second time, one of the deputy managers at a company where I recently set up a system raised a huge stink. He followed me around during the installation and asked questions. It turned out he was trying to set up a system at home to connect to the office network. Back then, it was much harder than it is now. I, by the way, did such a setup, but for another company, not this one. This guy, out of the blue, bought a bunch of equipment for $5,000, all IBM, and accused me of not doing all the work. The IT manager said she checked everything and knew I wasn't at fault, but I wasn't naive enough to believe her. I sent our business consultant to the main manager of that company to find out what was going on. It turned out that deputy never even submitted a request for remote access, and the entire company staff confirmed my version of events. Of course, my boss tried again to blow the situation up to a critical failure. Remember those insanely detailed records and time tracking, she demanded. Well, although her madness with requirements had already subsided, I still kept records. She set up another meeting, a complete disgrace for her. I refuted all the accusations brought by her and that deputy manager with full documentation. My good friend, the business consultant, backed up my words, and the cherry on top, the main manager of that company, personally called the corporation's head office to apologize for his deputy's actions and praise my work. My boss looked like a complete idiot. All this happened because I strictly followed her own time tracking system, originally designed to push out the old staff. What next? Of course, she wasn't fired, mainly because the director would have had to explain why he hired a completely incompetent person and violated HR hiring policies. But I know you want to hear about juicy revenge. On the weekend after that meeting, the network of a large company where I had set up the entire IT infrastructure completely went down after a lightning strike. I remotely ran diagnostics and realized it only needed a new hard drive and restoration from a backup. On Monday, I came to work. Before heading out to fix the client's network, the boss called me to her office. She offered me a 3-month severance package upon resignation, full salary benefits, and everything else. Usually such things were given only to top managers. She hated me and wanted to get rid of me. I said I'd gladly agree, but she needed me to fix the client's issue first. After all, it's a serious matter. She said no. While I was signing the papers, she rambled some incoherent nonsense about my efficiency. I finished signing, took my copy, and told her she had no idea what she was talking about. And this severance package was the best proof of that. I gathered my things, said goodbye to my friends. Many were in shock and cried, "I won't hide my own eyes were wet." I told them everything was fine, and you know what? Everything really was fine. For several years in the evenings and weekends, I had been developing my software business with the full approval of my previous supervisor. I left the job with 3 months of full salary, dedicated all my time to my business, and it started bringing me more money than my old job. And my friend, whom she had fired earlier, I used my connections and got him a new, better job. As for my former boss, it took them more than 2 months to replace that hard drive and restore the data for the client whose network went down after the lightning strike. I wasn't kidding when I said she hired completely wrong people for the roles. Apparently, that company with the lightning strike was furious, because in the end, the firm lost 75% of its clients over the next couple of years. My friend's former colleagues kept me updated until they themselves left. Wow, this is just blatant incompetence starting from the management down to this manager. I sympathize that you had to go through this. We also had a reorganization at a company where I worked. For some reason, after all the reshuffling, the IT department started reporting to the chief accountant, the financial director. He hired some consultant to temporarily replace the vice president of IT during the restructuring. The problem was that this financier had absolutely no connection to IT. Yes, you can already guess where this led. There were active rumors that this consultant would stay permanently. He knew the basics and constantly said obvious things, peppering them with a bunch of empty talk to seem smart. He constantly dropped names of people from Microsoft, often incorrectly referred to things, and it was obvious he was out of his depth. And we broke the department, fixed it. Maybe we need to hire temporary employees for this. Yes, we are exactly that department. We're IT, we fix things if something doesn't work. He constantly said nonsense. I talked to the former vice president, and he said, blah, blah, temporary work is great. He never even spoke to him one-on-one. He told every employee, "You're the only person here I really trust." And there were 3 such people. We started comparing notes after talking with him. He was like a worm in an apple, sucking up to everyone paving his way to the chair. He tried to push the idea that we needed to hire temporary workers to do our job instead of spending the budget on a full-time specialist and training them in rare necessary skills, which you obviously can't teach a random temporary employee. We explained this to him until we were blue in the face. No, still only temporary, only a contract with this specific firm. He got on everyone's nerves, and a couple of people started investigating. The website of that firm was empty, like it was just for show. Someone found out that his name was linked to that firm, and then everything became clear. He was trying to use us as a springboard so that other branches would also start using his firm's services. Well, that's all. Thank you for listening to these 2 stories to the end. Maybe you also have some similar cases you could share in the comments. I think we'd all be very interested to hear them. Watch our previous videos, which you'll see right here, subscribe to our channel, and good luck to you.